Morning, everyone. Thank you. As Brenda Stoddard mentioned, my name is Martha Nguyen. Together with my friend and colleague Tina Kiang, we are in charge of developing and publishing all of the policy documents to help implement GDUFA 3. I'm going to start by very briefly describing the types of policy documents that we use. The first one is a guidance for industry. This is a document that is intended to describe FDA's current thinking on a particular subject. It contains non-binding recommendations. So if you would like to propose a different way of complying with the existing statutes and regulations for ANDA approval, you can do so by contacting us or submitting a justification in your application. We also publish manuals of policies and procedures. These are internal documents that are intended to provide additional clarity for FDA staff in implementing these policies and procedures related to, in this case, GDUFA. We make them external so that external industry and regulated industry can have a better understanding of the policies and procedures that we use to implement GDUFA. They are all published on our website. The guidances themselves will be announced in the Federal Register with a Federal Register notice called a Notice of Availability. We have a number of different ways that we identify the need for GDUFA policy development. The very first and the most important is the GDUFA commitment letter itself. In particular, the Section 9 of the GDUFA commitment letter specifies specific documents that we committed to during negotiations to publish to implement GDUFA. There are many other sections of the GDUFA commitment letter that don't have a specific commitment to publish a document, but we will identify a need for additional clarity to be able to explain better how we're going to implement that particular program provision of GDUFA. In those cases, we will on our own publish either a guidance or a map or sometimes companion documents that both assist industry and FDA in being able to implement those provisions. The other area of GDUFA policy development is existing GDUFA 2 documents that we had published in the last iteration. In that case, we would be updating the existing document to reflect any changes that we had made during the GDUFA 3 negotiation. There are, under GDUFA 3, a number of program enhancements that we agreed to where there is not specific clarity in the GDUFA commitment letter itself. We will choose to publish a guidance or a map to provide greater clarity around our thinking and how we intend to implement GDUFA in those instances. And then finally, we heard both from you and from internal stakeholders some of the areas where we could do things a little bit differently during GDUFA 3. Those lessons learned do inform our policy development process as well. So now I'm going to introduce a challenge question. And it is, can you or can you not make comments to a guidance at any time? Does anyone have a? I see some nodding and some shaking. I will tell you that the answer is true. You can comment on any guidance at any time, even if the guidance comment period is closed. We try to do either a 60 or a 90-day comment period for guidances, which allows us to close out that part of the policy development process so that we can consider all of those comments when we start finalizing a guidance. But even if the guidance is final, or even if the docket has closed, you can still comment on that guidance. You'll go to regulations.gov, and the comment now button may not be live, but you can click on the document and submit another comment. I have in my office, and I'm sure that Tina does as well, a lead regulatory counsel and a lead project manager that monitors each docket and considers those comments, disseminates them to the right subject matter experts internally so that we can very carefully consider your feedback. Next, I will go through the policy documents that we have published to date to implement GDUFA 3. I organized these documents in order of the different chapters of the commitment letter, the first being the one related to performance goals. These are then subsequently published in or ordered here in order of date of publication. The very first document that we published related to performance goals was a GDUFA 3 commitment to open a docket to solicit comment on Appendix A of our 2018 amendments guidance. Some of you may know that Appendix A included a list of what we consider to be major deficiencies. If major deficiencies were present, a longer goal date would be assigned to the review of the amended application once submitted. So this docket was intended to solicit additional feedback from regulated industry on the deficiencies where the additional clarity was needed, and perhaps where there might not be as much agreement on the nature of the deficiency or the severity of it. We also updated our existing GDUFA 2 guidance on prior approval supplements under GDUFA. This was a GDUFA 2 guidance, and we made very minor changes to be able to update it for GDUFA 3. We published that, I think, within days of GDUFA 3 starting in October 2022. We also, later that year, published a guidance on failure to respond after a CR letter is issued under GDUFA. This guidance is intended to assist applicants in responding to CR letters and to reflect our thinking on what happens after a CR letter is submitted and the types of courses of action that an applicant may have upon receiving a CR letter. The next set of documents that I'll go through are the ones related to program enhancements under GDUFA 3. The first one here was also published at the same time as the PAS guidance I mentioned on the previous slide. And this one is to update an existing GDUFA 2 guidance document on post-complete response letter teleconferences between FDA and applicants. And it is, this type of teleconference is to clarify the deficiencies that were identified in the CR letter. This guidance included very minor revisions for GDUFA 3. We also, at the same time, issued a guidance on information requests and discipline review letters. These, which we call IRs and DRLs, are part of the communication that FDA engages in with an applicant during the review of an ANDA. This guidance was updated to include additional information reflecting the GDUFA 3 commitment letter. I noted earlier that we often will publish a manual of policy and procedure to provide additional details to staff. In this case, we had a guidance and a companion map that both had an outward-facing component, the guidance on IRs and DRLs, and an inward-facing component, the map on the same topic, to provide additional policies and procedures for staff in reviewing and issuing IRs and DRLs. Next, we also updated a map that we informally call the Communications with Industry map. This map has general principles and procedures for communicating the review status of applications with the applicant, consistent with what we committed to under GDUFA 3. And then finally, we published a map on suitability petitions, which describes how FDA will respond to suitability petitions that were submitted by or on behalf of applicants. And this reflects our GDUFA 3 commitments around suitability petitions, which was new to the GDUFA program under GDUFA 3. In June 2023, we published the guidance on cover letter attachments. This one is intended to provide for applicants optional attachments that can be used when preparing cover letters to accompany a controlled correspondence or other ANDA submissions, such as original ANDAs and amendments and supplements. These do not replace the recommendations for what should be contained in a cover letter, but are intended to provide additional recommendations when preparing those documents. We more recently published the amendments and requests for final approval to tentatively approved ANDAs. This guidance is intended to provide our recommendations and current thinking on the timing and the content of amendments to tentatively approved ANDAs. The goal here is to be able to facilitate not only timely submission of those requests, but enough information that allows us to be able to take a final approval action on the earliest lawful ANDA approval date. This guidance replaced an existing guidance that we had published previously in 2020. We at the same time also published a guidance that is a revision to an existing guidance on requests for reconsideration at the division level under GDUFA. This one describes the types of the types of actions related to an ANDA that can be where we can submit a request for a reconsideration, and these go through the division level and would be appealed up through the the formal dispute resolution process. The guidance revision was intended to capture the additional commitments and changes that we agreed to under GDUFA 3. This guidance, the next guidance is the post-warning letter meetings guidance, and I'm going to defer additional description of this guidance to my colleague, Tina. The next set of policy documents are related to implementation of the pre-ANDA program. The first one in this area is around competitive generic therapies. This guidance includes a description of the process that applicants should use when requesting a designation of a CGT and the criteria for the CGT designation. It includes some information around the types of actions that FDA would take to expedite a drug application that is designated as a CGT. And the changes that we made to this existing guidance were to include GDUFA 3 program updates. We made similar revisions in the same time frame at the beginning of GDUFA 3 to the formal meetings guidance. This describes the types of meetings that applicants can request when preparing an ANDA for a complex product. It includes specifically information on requesting as well as conducting these types of meetings, both the pre-submission meetings as well as the mid-cycle review meetings and the post-complete response letter meetings. This was an existing GDUFA 2 guidance that we updated to incorporate GDUFA 3 changes. We had here a companion map called Evaluating Requests for and Conducting Product Development and Pre-Submission Pre-ANDA meetings. These are two of the types of meetings that developers of complex products can avail themselves of. This map contains additional information for staff in accepting and granting those types of requests. It was made public as a map to increase transparency so that applicants can have a better understanding of what we are looking for when considering these requests. We also published, a revision to the controlled correspondence guidance. This is the guidance that describes the process by which generic drug applicants and their representatives can submit to FDA questions before the submission of an ANDA through what we call a controlled correspondence. The guidance also describes the process for our responding to and providing communications about those controls. We published a guidance on PSG meetings between FDA and ANDA applicants. This was a new meeting type, and this guidance was intended to provide additional information on those types of requests for those meetings, what should be included in the meeting package, as well as how FDA would consider those requests and the timing around the scheduling and conducting of those meetings. And we also published a more recent version of the controlled correspondence guidance in March of this year. Next, I have a challenge question. which is what type of policy document is an internal document and which one is an external document. Is a guidance an internal document? The answer is that the map is internal to FDA. It is made public to increase transparency. The guidance is intended to be directed at external industry. FDA staff also refer to that as a very important resource. And next, I will turn it over to my friend and colleague, Tina Kiang.
So there are also a number of policy documents that were developed in OPQ, and some of them were mentioned by Susan earlier today. And so the first one that I will be talking about is the guidance regarding the review of drug master files in advance of certain ANDAs submissions under GDUFA. This describes when an early assessment of type 2 DMFs, also referred to as the DMF prior assessment, can be reviewed and requested and commenced by the DMF holder. It provides recommendations to the DMF holder regarding when the request can be made. The request can be made 6 months prior to the planned submission of certain ANDAs or prior approval supplements. The guidance lists the eligibility and the submission requirements for such requests. We have a number of policy documents with regard to facilities. The first one is called Facility Readiness Goal Date Decisions under GDUFA. It incorporates, under the GDUFA commitment letter, it was requested that we incorporate how FDA would assess a goal date to a facility if the facility is not considered ready for inspection. If a facility is considered not ready for inspection, meaning that it was checked off as not ready for inspection under Form 356H, then a goal date of 15 months would be assigned to that impending ANDA. This would allow FDA to focus resources on substantively complete applications with facilities that were ready for inspection. It also outlines, for example, if after those, after the 15 months, if the facility is still not ready for inspection, what the new timelines would be. The next guidance is regarding the pre-submission of facility information related to prioritized generic drug applications. This was published in December 2022. This is actually a revision of a November 2017 guidance on the same topic. Under the commitment letter, under the GDUFA 3 negotiations and commitment letter, it was requested to kind of streamline the information that was previously published in that 2017 guidance. And so in this guidance, it discusses the content, timing, and assessment of what the pre-submission facility information, pre-submission correspondence, or PFC, for a priority ANDA, such that the ANDA would be eligible for priority review. We greatly streamlined the type of information and the amount of information that would be necessary to submit for these pre-submission correspondences, such that it would reduce the burden essentially on sponsors submitting ANDAs, in particular, such that a PFC does not look like an ANDA light essentially on the CMC information. The next one, again, as previously mentioned by Susan in her presentation, is a map on the assessment of facility-based major to minor classification requests. And so this was published in June 2023, and there was also a minor revision in December 2023. This is, again, an internal policy and procedure regarding the assessment requests for facility-based complete response letter amendments for original ANDAs and prior approval supplements. In the GDUFA 3 commitment letter, it states that we discuss how OPQ and OGD should coordinate these responses and receive and accept these amendments. So when these reclassification requests are received, this map outlines how these amendments will be coordinated within the agency by OGD and OPQ in order to grant or deny the request. And finally, and I realize that this is specifically a facility one and not for the complete response letter, and I apologize, but this is for post-warning letter meetings under GDUFA, and it talks about information on the implementation of post-warning letter meetings for certain facilities. So it talks about how an eligible facility may request a warning letter meeting after receiving a warning letter. Within it also makes recommendations regarding the information that would need to be submitted, and the meeting request would be regarding the ongoing remediation efforts by the facility in response to CGMP deficiencies in the referred warning letter. How to prepare the meeting package, including what should be included in the meeting package and the specific questions and responses that the facility intends to provide, and how FDA will conduct those meetings. Finally, we have a guidance document regarding user fees. In the GDUFA 3 commitment letter, the user fee structure was changed somewhat. And so this is actually a revision of a previous guidance, which reflects the changes that occurred in the GDUFA 3 commitment. It explains the new fee structures, the types of fees, and which entities are responsible for paying those fees under the commitments. While a fee guidance is pretty standard and boring, there is one notable addition to the guidance in response to fulfilling one of our commitments, and that's regarding API excipient mixtures. In this guidance, it notes that manufacturers of API excipient mixtures are generally required to pay the finished dosage form facility fee. However, there is an exception that's outlined in this guidance, and it's for fee purposes only. So if, when the mixture, specifically this API excipient mixture is produced, because the API is unstable, meaning that it cannot be transported on its own, then a sponsor may request, the API manufacturer may request that the fee be waived. This, when we're talking about unstable and cannot be transported on its own, what we mean is that mixing the API with an excipient would prevent the loss of one or more critical quality attributes. For example, adding an antioxidant to increase chemical stability of such an API. If a company is claiming that they can take this exception and therefore not pay a fee, they would have to provide a rationale that is clearly stated and the data that is supportive of that request. And so that's all I have, but I do have, I am going to talk a little bit about upcoming documents. And so, as Martha said, in the GDUFA commitment letter, we do note a number of guidance documents and other documents that we have stated that we are going to publish. But also we are constantly looking at the commitment letter to see, where else in the commitments can we enhance? What documents can we revise such that, we continue to meet the commitments? And so there are still forthcoming revisions to previously published documents to update in order to meet the commitments. These typically are, what we call level 2 revisions, meaning they're minor revisions because the general overall policies haven't changed, but there are minor tweaks as a result of the commitments, for example. And because of that, just so level 2 guidances, when they are published, they don't publish with a notice of availability. And so these things aren't officially announced, but keep a watch on them. Make sure that you are looking out for them. And I believe OGD publishes at the end of the year a document that or I believe ORP publishes at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, the documents that are on the way. So again, we are continuing to do our work to fulfill the GDUFA commitments, and this is just a sampling of what we've already accomplished. We are also committed, and a lot of the guidances that we have shown are draft guidances, and we're extremely committed to making sure that these draft guidances become final. And the reason why is because we want to provide assurance to the industry as well as, to our FDA colleagues as to what our current thinking is when we're doing our work. Draft guidances are not for implementation. And so, while they are out there and they generally reflect, they aren't officially implementable. And so finalizing those guidances provides assurance to both FDA and the industry as to what our recommendations are and the consistency with which we apply those recommendations. And finally, at the beginning of every year and in July, CDER publishes what's called the guidance agenda. And this is not just on GDUFA 3, it's not just on quality, it's about any topic related to the work that's being done in CDER. And so in using that guidance agenda, you can see what is forthcoming and what is projected to be published in the coming year. Now, that is also to say that's not exclusively what's going to be published in the coming year. It is just the minimum of what our goals are. There are guidances that are not on that list that will be published, sometimes because there are priorities that come up or that, we unexpectedly finish faster, which does happen sometimes. But also to note that what's on that guidance agenda typically is upcoming draft guidances. The only exception is that on that guidance agenda, we will publish what we call immediately in effect guidances as well, which means that it will be the first public notification that, that a guidance on that topic will be published. But typically what's on that guidance agenda is going to be the upcoming draft guidances for the coming year. So, we've done a lot of work collectively, between OGD and OPQ, and I value the collaboration that we have between our two offices in getting a lot of this work done. We have done an amazing amount of work in the last 2.5 years, coming out of the GDUFA 3 negotiations and commitments, and are looking forward for the next couple of years to continue doing our work to meet the commitments that we have in the GDUFA 3 and moving into GDUFA 4. And so I come to our last challenge question, which is, and it's an easy one because I just talked about it, where can you find out what guidance documents CDER is currently working on? And so, again, this is the CDER guidance agenda, which was currently updated in 2024. There will be a mid-year update in July of 2024. Hopefully, when you get these slides, you will be able to click the hyperlink, because this hyperlink here will take you directly to that PDF file. And I've given the next speaker a couple of minutes. So we'll welcome up Roseanne and Arlene, who will be speaking about GDUFA 3 suitability petitions.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Martha and Tina, for that wonderful presentation. My colleague Rosie and I today will be talking about GDUFA 3 suitability petitions. On this slide, it's just an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, which is our objective, resources, GDUFA 3, best practices in submitting a suitability petition, as well as common issues and deficiencies that we see when we're reviewing suitability petitions at FDA. So our learning objectives for today is to provide a background refresher on the generic drug user fee amendments commitment letter, also known as GDUFA 3, with regard to reviewing suitability petitions. We're also going to describe the proper format and content of a suitability petition. In addition, we're going to review the requirements for submitting suitability petitions that are triggered by the Pediatric Research Equity Act, also known as PREA. We're also going to list the reasons for denial of a suitability petition. And we're going to identify best practices and tips for submitting a quality suitability petition to FDA. So let's start with the basics. What is a suitability petition? A suitability petition is actually a type of citizen petition. It's a request to submit an abbreviated new drug application that is different from the reference listed drug, the RLD, in one or more of the following ways: strength, route of administration, dosage form, and change in one active ingredient in a fixed combination drug product, such as a drug product with multiple active ingredients. So what are our GDUFA 3 commitments with regard to suitability petitions? Well, this was brand new under GDUFA 3. FDA has made certain commitments when it comes to suitability petitions for fiscal years 2024 through 2027. Most importantly, we have already started conducting completeness assessments for suitability petitions in this fiscal year. The time frame for completing these completeness assessments is 21 days after the date of petition submission. However, if an information request is issued as part of the completeness assessment and the petitioner submits a response, FDA will finish the completeness assessment within 21 days after we receive the IR response. So under GDUFA 3, we also have the priority of suitability petitions that fit under certain categories. For example, suitability petitions that could mitigate or resolve a drug shortage and prevent future shortages. Suitability petitions that address a public health emergency declared by the Secretary of HHS under Section 319 of the PHS Act. Petitions that are for a new strength of a parenteral product that could aid in eliminating waste or mitigating the number of vials needed per dose by addressing deficiencies in patient weight, body size, or age. Finally, the prioritization of suitability petitions that fall under special review programs under the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, also known as PEPFAR. Our next GDUFA 3 slide talks about the goals that we've made under GDUFA 3 with regard to completing suitability petitions over the next few fiscal years. So in this fiscal year, FDA is committing to a goal of 50% of submissions within 6 months after completeness assessment and up to a maximum of 50 suitability petitions completed. By fiscal year 2025, the goal is 70% of submissions within 6 months after completeness assessment and up to a maximum of 70 suitability petitions completed. By fiscal year 2026, that number rises to 80% of submissions within 6 months after completeness assessment and up to a maximum of 80 suitability petitions completed. By the end of GDUFA 3 in fiscal year 2027, that number rises to 90% of submissions within 6 months after completeness assessment and up to a maximum of 90 suitability petitions completed. So now that we've gone over what is a suitability petition and our GDUFA 3 goals, what do you do when you submit a suitability petition to the FDA? Well, as I stated earlier, suitability petitions are a type of citizen petition. So that's really important because petitioners must follow the format that's outlined in 21 CFR 10.30. Additionally, suitability petitions are submitted to our dockets management staff. And I want to highlight a few things here on this slide because it's important in processing your suitability petitions in a timely manner. Your submissions, your supplemental material, your amendments, and that includes responses to information requests, are related to a specific docket ID, and they should be uploaded using FDA's electronic method for specific electronic submissions via docket ID FDA-23-S-0610. I know that's very specific, but it's very important and preventing any processing delays of your suitability petition. All supplemental or supported material and amendments must also reference the previously assigned docket ID. And there's an example here, including your subject, an amendment to FDA, and what your assigned docket ID is. So DMS can process it in compliance with the Code of Federal Regulations. I highly encourage you, if you're going to submit a suitability petition to the FDA, to refer to instructions on how to upload it and using the instructions that are entitled Electronic Method for Specific Electronic Submissions to FDA's Division of Dockets Management staff. So more about submitting a suitability petition. As I mentioned, it is a type of citizen petition. So refer to 21 CFR 10.30. And on that section, there are 5 sections that a citizen petition must include, which includes a suitability petition. And that is action requested, statement of grounds, environmental impact, economic impact, and certification. Additional content specifically for suitability petitions are outlined in 21 CFR 314.93, paragraph D. And that paragraph highlights that it's important to identify a reference listed drug, submit a copy of the currently approved RLD labeling, as well as submit a copy of the proposed labeling. Finally, it's important when you submit your suitability petition to, if your request triggers PREA, that you submit your waiver request and a waiver justification. So suitability petitions and PREA. It's important to note that suitability petitions proposing a change in dosage form, route of administration, or a change in active ingredient in a fixed combination drug product do trigger the requirements for pediatric assessments or molecularly targeted pediatric cancer investigations under PREA. These requirements may be waived, but you must submit a waiver request. PREA authorizes FDA to waive the requirement to submit a pediatric assessment based on certain criteria for some or all pediatric age groups. So for any suitability petition that requests a change in dosage form, route of administration, or a new ingredient in a fixed combination product, an applicant should provide a request to waive the requirements triggered by PREA. So we really want to refer to you to the guidance that was issued last year on PREA requirements and requesting a waiver. This FDA draft guidance for industry, it has a really long name, Pediatric Drug Development Regulatory Considerations, complying with the Pediatric Research Equity Act and qualifying for pediatric exclusivity under the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act. So that guidance replaces a previous guidance and it outlines the criteria for requesting a PREA waiver. I highly recommend reviewing that if your request triggers PREA. So requesting a PREA waiver. To request a waiver, applicants should provide the following: the drug name, applicant name, and drug indication, the age group indicated in the waiver request, the statutory reasons for requesting a waiver, including reference to the applicable statutory authority, and finally, evidence that the request meets the statutory reasons for waiver. All relevant scientific clinical justifications for waiver should be included. It's important to note that if we deny your PREA waiver request, your suitability petition will be denied. Now I would like to move on to our challenge question number 1 before I turn it over to my colleague Rosie. Which type of change does not trigger the requirements under PREA? Is it A, changes in dosage form, B, changes in route of administration, C, changes in strength, D, changes in one active ingredient in a fixed combination drug product? Any guesses? Well, I hope you're all thinking of C. The correct answer is C, changes in strength. Except for changes in strength, all other requested changes do trigger PREA and require PREA waiver and justification when submitting your suitability petition. Thank you so much. I will now turn it over to my colleague Rosie to discuss recommended supplemental information when submitting your suitability petition, as well as best practices.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Arlene. So once again, I'm Rosie Pagaduan. I'm a supervisory pharmacist in the Division of Filing Review. Arlene just went over the background on suitability petitions, a refresher on the GDUFA 3 commitments, as well as jumping into the required content for submitting a suitability petition. So now I'll be transitioning into some supplemental information that's recommended, not required, but it can facilitate the review of your suitability petition. We did mention that the RLD labeling and proposed labeling is required for a suitability petition, but if available, it is helpful to provide annotated proposed labeling that identifies all the differences between the prescribing information and the RLD labeling. If there is a proposed change in strength, provide a description of the proposed product. For example, the tablet color, shape, size, or any identifying imprint codes. And if available, also provide proposed carton labeling as well as container labels. For petitions requesting a different active ingredient in a fixed combination drug product, provide a description of any differences in clinical safety or efficacy that may be seen with the newly proposed active ingredient compared to the active ingredient in the RLD. For example, if the new active ingredient has a narrow therapeutic index, or if it could give rise to different adverse effects from that of the RLD, those would be important to note. And then verify whether dosing or presentation strength of the overall product will change as a result of the substitution of one of the active ingredients. For petitions requesting a different route of administration or dosage form, submit information on whether the different ROA or dosage form gives rise to a potentially adverse event profile. Going from a tablet to an injection may lead to injection site reactions that are obviously wouldn't exist in the tablet formulation, but important to point out. You'll want to include details of what the clinical outcome or impact is if a user were to administer the proposed product through the RLD's intended route of administration. Indicate any changes in administration technique or instructions for use. For example, changes from a tablet to an orally disintegrating tablet should have different administration techniques or instructions that are identified in the proposed labeling. Now I'll move on to reasons for denial of a suitability petition. 21 CFR 314.93E outlines the reasons that the FDA may deny a suitability petition, starting with some of the more common reasons that we've seen. If during our review, the agency identifies that investigations must be conducted to show the safety and effectiveness of the drug product, then the petition will be denied. For petitions that seek a change to an active ingredient, the drug product that is the subject of the petition must be a fixed combination drug product. It cannot be a single active ingredient drug product seeking to change that active ingredient. And then if your petition triggers PREA and a PREA waiver request is denied or not granted, the FDA will deny your petition as the proposed product is ineligible for approval in an ANDA. If any of the proposed changes from the listed drug jeopardize the safety or effective use of the product so as to necessitate significant labeling changes to address the newly introduced safety or effectiveness problem, then your petition will be denied. If the FDA determines that the RLD, that's the basis of submission of your petition, has been withdrawn from sale for safety or effectiveness reasons, or this is a big one, if the RLD drug has been voluntarily withdrawn and the agency has not determined that it's been withdrawn for safety or effectiveness reasons, that could prolong or result in a denial of your petition. If a drug product is already approved in an NDA for the change that's described in your petition could be denied. So this slide covers the denial reasons listed in 314.93 pertaining to petitions that are proposing changes in an active ingredient for a fixed combination drug product. It's provided here for completeness purposes only. You can use it as a reference, but they aren't commonly encountered as petitions for fixed combination drug product changes of the active ingredient aren't as common. Now jumping into the more interesting part, best practices for submitting a suitability petition. Ensure your amendments are submitted properly. Arlene went over the guide that shows instructions on how to upload your amendments to your docket. You'll want to ensure that all amendments, so any responses to information requests that are issued during the completeness assessment stage or even thereafter, should be uploaded using the Shell docket ID FDA 2013 S0610. And then in your amendment itself, be sure to include a subject line or a title that identifies the document as an amendment, referencing the original docket number that you were assigned. For example, subject amendment to FDA, and then your petition number. Does your petition propose a change in dosage form, route of administration, or a change in an active ingredient in a fixed combination drug? If so, make sure you provide your PREA waiver request. Arlene went over the content that's required for a PREA waiver request and also referred to the guidance. There's also a link at the end of this presentation to the resource for that guidance. When submitting a petition, make sure you check the Orange Book. You'll want to check if an NDA has already been approved for the drug product that's proposed in your petition. If one is already approved, you can go ahead and submit your ANDA referencing that NDA as the basis of submission. If the RLD that's cited as the basis of submission has been discontinued, you'll want to make sure that a determination has been made by the agency that the product was not discontinued or withdrawn for reasons of safety or effectiveness reasons. If it has been discontinued and no determination has been made, you may submit a citizen petition to seek a determination whether the RLD was withdrawn from sale for reasons of safety or effectiveness reasons. This determination must be made prior to approving a suitability petition relying on a discontinued NDA. And lastly, ensure your petition submission includes a copy of the proposed labeling and a copy of the approved labeling of the reference listed drug. All right. For any petitioners that might have any petitions pending that were submitted prior to FY 2024 and you want a GDUFA goal date, there is an option for you. You can withdraw that petition and resubmit that petition, and you'll receive a goal date upon completion of a completeness assessment. Lastly, wait for approval of your suitability petition. FDA will refuse to receive an ANDA citing a pending suitability petition or a suitability petition that was denied, as that ANDA would lack a legal basis of submission. All right. And challenge question 2. Which of the following statements is not true? A copy of the currently approved RLD labeling and proposed labeling should be included with a suitability petition. B, a suitability petition allows a person to submit a request to change a dosing regimen different from that of a listed drug. C, a suitability petition will be denied if a drug product is approved in an NDA for the change described in the petition. And D, a suitability petition will be denied if the reference listed drug that is the basis of the petition has been voluntarily withdrawn from sale and the agency has not determined whether the withdrawal is for safety or effectiveness reasons. Any guesses? B, I'm hearing B. Correct answer is B. You cannot submit a petition proposing a change in dosing regimen. The 4 permissible types of changes are changes in strength, dosage form, route of administration, and a single active ingredient in a fixed combination drug product. Again, here are the resources, a couple of the guidances that we mentioned, as well as a link to the map on our internal review of suitability petitions. And as a summary, we went over the format and content that's outlined in the regulations. Big thing is to provide that waiver request for any petitions that trigger PREA. Remember the instructions for submitting amendments to dockets management staff. This is important for timely processing of your petition. And then once your suitability petition is approved, you can go ahead and submit your ANDA. Now I'll pass this on to Joe. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for listening to the presentations thus far and listening to this one. So this is going to be the last session before we jump into a Q&A. So again, my name is Joseph Kotzibar. I'm a Regulatory Health Project Manager in ORS OGD, and I'll be covering today my presentation on the overview of the FDA Product Specific Guidance Program, otherwise or betterly known as PSGs. So what we'll cover today is we'll go through the PSG background. We'll talk about the relation to the FDA's ANDA program. We'll cover an overview of the FDA PSG program as a whole, talk through the GDUFA 3 commitments, and talk through public comments and public requests. And then lastly, we'll end with discussing PSG teleconferences or TCONs and other PSG meetings. So to start, we'll start with the basics. What is a product-specific guidance? So this term has been used a few times through the presentations this morning. Product-specific guidances are a great way to start with your generic drug development. So very, very similar to how the FDA publishes general guidances for industry, they also publish these product-specific guidances, which these are going to reflect the FDA's current thinking and expectations on how to develop a generic drug product that is therapeutically equivalent to a specific RLD, or reference listed drug. These guidances, of course, as their names, contain product-specific recommendations to help identify the methods for developing generic drugs and generate the evidence needed to support ANDA approval. They are going to include key science and research outputs, and they're very unique to the generic drug development program. So when we think about establishing bioequivalence for a current drug product, you can't solely rely on PSGs. They're a great resource, and I'll highly recommend them every time. But of course, you need to also look into the regulations in 21 CFR, as well as these other general guidances I just mentioned on the previous slide. All three of these approaches used together can really help paint the picture for how to show your product is bioequivalent to the innovator, or RLD. PSGs also play a very unique and integral part in the FDA's ANDA program. So when we think about the pre-ANDA program, there's a few pathways industry can go about talking with the FDA or receiving further guidance or recommendations from the FDA. Some of these pathways include the pre-ANDA meetings, which I believe we'll have a presentation on later today, controlled correspondences, otherwise known as CCs, and then my presentation specifically talking about these PSGs. PSGs are often developed based on GDUFA funded research. Once they're developed, they're published into the public domain space, and then they go under a review process to where the general public, similar to other general guidances, can always comment on these and leave feedback. So this program started back in 2007. The FDA has been publishing these PSGs to provide clear and direct recommendations to ANDA applicants. You can see over time, so this is going back really to almost the beginning of GDUFA, PSGs have generally increased over time, but they show a great variance year to year. As of today, we have 2,186 PSGs posted, and actually I think there's a typo there. We just posted a standalone PSG last week, so that number is 2,187 PSGs. And we will talk about standalone PSGs here shortly. What I think is impressive though, 40% of these, or about 40%, are for complex products. This is a high number in my opinion because complex products in general require obstacles, both regulatory and scientific, in order to establish bioequivalence. So having 40% of our PSGs for complex generic products, I think is a pretty good feat for the PSG program. So now focusing on the GDUFA 3 commitments with PSGs. This is one of the biggest drivers, I would say, on when to expect PSGs to be developed. So for non-complex NCE new drug applications, or NDAs, approved on or after October 1st, 2022, that was the start of GDUFA 3, a PSG will be issued for 90% of such NDA products within 2 years. So what does that really mean? So we are saying that if a drug product is a non-complex product and it's a NCE, so it's a new chemical entity that is a specific type of new drug application, typically going to be a type 1 approval. For all of these non-complex products, the FDA is committed to having a PSG published within 2 years of that RLD approval. So while the commitment is only 90%, really we're closer to 100%. I don't believe we actually have missed a GDUFA goal date in the past several years. So hopefully this shouldn't be too new to the folks listening in today, because this is no change from GDUFA 2. What's changed, and what's quite a big change, I would say, are for complex products. So complex products approved in NDAs, and I'll stop there because that's the first really big change. For the non-complex, it's focused on NCEs only. So this new complex commitment is going to talk about any new drug application that's been approved and considered a complex product. So for these complex NDAs on or after, again, that October 1st, 2022, the start of GDUFA 3, a PSG will be issued for 50% of such NDAs within 2 years, 75% within 3 years. Another way to say that is essentially for any complex NDA approved after that start of GDUFA 3, the FDA is committed to 50% of those within 2 years. An additional 25% of those products will be published within 3 years. And then there's going to be a missing 25% that do not get a GDUFA commitment. Those are going to be really for products that have really challenging and high hurdles for their scientific or regulatory obstacles in order to complete the PSG. Typically, those PSGs are going to need research before bioequivalence recommendation can be established. And then, of course, for any PSGs that were for complex products approved before GDUFA 3, FDA will strive to continue those as quickly as they can. So when we think about the PSG process, it's a very cyclical process in nature. So we'll always have a pool of products we can create PSGs for. These PSGs are prioritized for development or revision into batches. They go through the development phase, which can be anywhere from months to years, depending on the complexity of the product. The PSGs will then be published, typically in quarterly batches or sometimes as standalones. And then the guidances will seek public comment, just like any other posted guidance for industry. So you may be asking, what's some of the initiating events that would lead to a PSG development? Or how do you prioritize these PSGs to be developed? Those are great questions. So this excerpt here is from the PSG snapshot available on the FDA's website. And here it has a great list of actually initiating events, prioritization factors, and data to support the PSG development. So while this is not fully all-inclusive, it's going to cover most of the factors. So some of these initiating events are going to be recently approved NDAs and supplemental NDAs, FDA internal analysis into products without PSGs, any pre-ANDA meeting requests, public requests, comments to the PSG docket, which we'll cover here in a couple slides, controlled correspondences, or citizens petitions. Now, how do we prioritize the PSGs into these batches? Well, first and foremost, GDUFA commitment is always going to be at the top of the list. FDA is going to strive to meet those GDUFA commitments laid out in the GDUFA 3 commitment letter. Other than that, though, we do take into other considerations such as stakeholder interest via ANDA submissions, drug availability and accessibility, public requests, and public health priorities. Last but not least, there is data to support PSG development. So we use pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic modeling, previous bioequivalence studies, NDA review, pharmacovigilance, and of course, the GDUFA-funded research outcomes. So how do we revise our PSGs? So that previous slide was really talking about how are we going to develop a new PSG. However, PSGs will need to be revised at certain times. So again, while this list is not all-inclusive, it's going to highlight most of the reasons we would choose to revise a guidance. Some of these include changes to the RLD, such as a labeling update, supplements for a new strength, newly identified safety concerns, consistency with revision to general guidances, citizens petitions, responses received to the BE comments, new bioequivalence approaches from research, and new knowledge from ANDA assessments and pre-ANDA meetings. We do have categories that list how the PSGs will be revised. So in general, there's critical, in vivo major, and in vitro major, minor, and editorial. And you can see some brief descriptions of how those revisions are done on the side there. So when are PSGs published? So we kind of talked about this a little bit on the cycle slide, but new and revised PSGs are published quarterly in 4 batches a year. And we've gotten really good at the scheduling to where they should be fairly consistent into these 4 months. So February, May, August, and November are going to be the 4 months we would typically be posting these batches of guidances. A PSG may be published, though, as a standalone guidance or standalone batch outside the quarterly publications. So again, just like that PSG we posted last week, this would fall into this category as a standalone posting. So a couple of these reasons why we would post a standalone guidance would be to coordinate with the CP response, to meet the GDUFA goal date, efficiency in developing PSGs for the same product in the same class. I believe this was last done with the topical batch of PSGs that was posted in late 2022, and a level 2 revision. The FDA is going to issue a notice in the Federal Registrar for every batch and standalone posting, except a level 2 revision. So you may be asking, why not a level 2 revision? What's special about a level 2 revision? So first, you kind of have to understand what a level 1 revision is. So level 1 revision would be how we typically think about how the PSGs are revised. It's going to describe a change in FDA's earlier interpretation or policy that are more than a minor in nature. A level 2 PSG revision is going to be strictly typographical errors found in the PSGs. There's never going to be a change in the bioequivalence recommendation or the agency thinking. So for the first time in late 2023, last year, we revised 3 PSGs through this level 2 revision process. So one of the best resources other than the PSGs themselves is this upcoming PSGs for generic drug product development, otherwise known as the forecast list. This is going to describe the FDA's plans for all upcoming new and revised PSGs for generic drug products in the next 12 months. What's new with GDUFA 3 is this list includes complex and non-complex products. Overall, this list is going to enhance transparency in the PSG development. What's new with GDUFA 3, we now list month and year on this forecast list, so applicants can have a really good understanding of the month they should expect to see that PSG published. Last but not least, we will ensure consistency in FDA recommendations and decisions following previous iterations of the PSG. So essentially what this means, we always want to list out the exact revision category and reason that the PSG is being revised. This will be very clear, hopefully to industry, what the change is going to reflect. The forecast list is updated quarterly with each batch posting. So really quick, we can take a quick look at what this forecast list looks like. So again, it's broken down into new and revised PSGs. You can see here a couple things to point out. We have that product complexity, so it's going to clearly indicate if the product is complex or non-complex. And then you can see that planned publication column where we will strive to give the closest we can to the month and year of that PSG posting. So just like other general guidances, you can also leave comments on the PSGs. So similar to other presenters this morning, the PSGs do have a special docket. So you can comment on the Federal Registrar notice through the docket number FDA 2007 D0369. The notice will identify a comment period for these recommendations once the PSGs are posted. Comments can be submitted electronically to the docket or by mail. And users can, of course, get help through the assistance on the regulations.gov support site. Overall, FDA is going to consider comments on these draft PSGs while revising the guidances. So when we think about public comments, we think about after the PSG is published, that's when industry can leave the comments. Public requests is kind of the opposite. So public requests are going to be submitted through the CDER Direct Next-Gen collaboration portal. And it's basically going to be a bioequivalence request for a product that does not have a PSG already. The FDA reviews these requests and takes appropriate action. You can see really since the beginning of GDUFA 2 in 2017, the public requests have significantly decreased. So I think there could be several reasons why we saw such a drastic decrease. One could potentially be just by the number of PSGs we have available. There's less products to send a public request in for. The other, I think industry has gotten better at looking at the forecast list. Using this forecast list, you can predict and see when PSGs are going to be coming out over the next year. So if you see a PSG that's going to be developed, either new or revised, you may forego submitting the public request because you know it's going to be published soon. So PSGs can be withdrawn. So typically, the PSGs are going to be withdrawn when they no longer reflect the FDA's current thinking. I would say this is most commonly due to when the RLD is withdrawn for safety or efficacy. The table shown on this slide is right on that link and right on the FDA's website. It is important to note that when a PSG is reposted, it will be removed from this withdrawn list because that guidance is no longer withdrawn. So last but not least, we'll cover PSG TCONs and PSG meetings. So for PSG TCONs, this is something new that was added with GDUFA 3. This meeting should be used when ANDA applicants can request a PSG TCON at any time during their product development, either pre-submission or post-submission, when FDA publishes a new or revised guidance that introduces a revised recommendation. However, it needs to meet a couple criteria. So the recommendation has to be related to an in vivo BE study, and the ANDA applicant has already commenced that in vivo BE study that may be different from that new PSG recommendation. Prospective ANDA applicants should submit a request for the pre-submission TCON and pre-submission PSG meeting electronically through the CDER Direct Next-Gen collaboration portal. Further, an ANDA applicant should submit a request for a post-submission PSG TCON or post-submission PSG meeting electronically through the electronic submissions gateway. In fiscal year 2023, 2 PSG TCON requests were received and held. So PSG meetings. So you may say, okay, how are these different than PSG TCONs? Well, PSG meetings, either pre-submission or post-submission, can be requested following the PSG TCON if additional discussion is still needed. So this allows a forum for scientific rationale for an approach other than the approach listed in the PSG. A pre-submission PSG meeting will be requested if the ANDA has not been submitted, and a post-submission PSG meeting will be requested if the ANDA has been already submitted. Controlled correspondences is another great pathway for applicants to follow up with the FDA on remaining issues following the PSG TCON. And other pre-ANDA and scientific meetings are also available as an alternative to a PSG meeting. However, the caveat to this is the FDA recommends that applicants do not submit a CC and request for a meeting at the same or around the same time asking those same questions. Unfortunately, last year, FDA did not receive any PSG meeting requests. So a little update on the next SBI webinar. So this was briefly mentioned in the first session. So there is going to be an upcoming SBIA webinar strictly focused on PSGs. So if you thought this presentation was useful or interesting, this webinar would be a great next steps to go and listen to. So it is titled Facilitating Generic Drug Product Development Through PSGs. It's April 25th, 1 to 4 p.m. You can see some of the topics covered. So it will start with a really high-level presentation of the PSG program, similar to this presentation, but then really delves into the scientific content recommended in the PSGs. It'll talk through BCS waiver options, the drug-device combination section in PSGs, consideration factors for bioequivalence studies, and the dissolution methods and database. So last but not least, I do have 2 challenge questions. So the first one is, what is not one of the factors FDA takes into consideration while prioritizing PSG development or revision. We have ANDA assessment, goal dates, public health priorities, public requests, and drug availability and accessibility. I see some nods. I think so A is the correct answer. So if you selected A, you'd be right. So ANDA assessment goal dates are not one of the prioritization factors. And the last question is, what is a new feature added with the GDUFA 3 commitments for the upcoming PSGs for generic drug product development, otherwise known as the forecast list? Forecasting both new and revised PSGs, forecasting both non-complex and complex PSGs, forecasting specific revision reasons for revised PSGs, and updated quarterly with each PSG batch posting. So this is kind of a tricky one. Hopefully everyone selected B, forecasting both non-complex and complex PSGs. So this was just started with GDUFA 3. Prior to GDUFA 3, we only listed complex products on this forecast list. All right, and here are some resources where a lot of this material was taken from. And with that, I'll conclude and we can start the Q&A panel. Turn it over to Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cortesbar. And let's welcome back our previous speakers for this session grouping, and also Dr. Saliba from Drug Shortages. And at this point, I'd like to introduce a new member to the panel, Dr. Reynolds Cantav, Senior Regulatory Health Project Manager, Enterprise Project Management Staff from the Office of Quality Assurance in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. All right. I don't see anybody at the mics. What's happening? We need to get some questions in-house. Anyone has questions in-house? Let's see if we have any brave souls in-house. There we go, sir. This is an auction. Anyone else on this side for questions? Because what we're going to do, we're going to take questions in-house, first mic, second mic, then we're going to go to online questions and start in that circle once more. So if you have any questions, please come up to the mic. Bring your laptop. Choose one. Okay. No, go stand wherever you want to stand. Okay, so let's start. This gentleman was here first, so let's start here. Sir, what's your question?
Great.
You have one question?
One question with multiple parts. No.
No.
So primarily a question for the suitability petition so far, Arlene. Petitions. However, in letters that we've received back, there's really been no sort of acknowledgement as to whether the petition was approved or not. So in industry, you're just kind of, sitting there shrugging your shoulders as to whether it's a priority review or not. So it's more of a request, if that's a consideration, that OGE can start to put some language into the completeness assessment letters to communicate whether it was considered a priority review or not. And then the second part of that question is, if you could just sort of give me your sort of concept as to what priority review that petition actually means. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you look a little familiar. So with regard to priority, so the commitment letter outlines the categories that are classified
for petitions that'll receive a priority designation. Currently, it does not outline any sort of shortened time frame specifically for it, but we do identify whether a petition is priority during the completeness assessment. However, I agree with you, we do not state that in the completeness assessment correspondence, but that is a great suggestion that I think we can take back. As for the could you repeat that?
The latter part was just what does prior review of petition actually sort of mean, since it's not really defined anywhere.
Right, so it isn't defined anywhere. There's no explicit shortened timeline, but there are internal measures to prioritize petitions that are identified as priority.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike, question for Mike 2, please.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for doing this today. We really appreciate it. Actually, Giuseppe Randazzo from AAM. We've had requests from members. They were excited to see that this was scheduled in April, so we appreciate y'all being here. A couple questions, and I'm not sure who can respond. One is...
One question, please.
One question, two parts. No, fine, one question. So one of the recent guides is, and this is combination of drug shortages and policy, it's notifying FDA of discontinuance or interruption is the specific guidance I'm referring to. It was recently re-released, and there was just some confusion from some of our members as it appeared to be released missing some information within. So this is a content, or excuse me, maybe a process question. It removed the sentence specifically, when finalized, this guidance will replace the March 2020 guidance. So it appeared to be final, but we believe it was still draft. So I'm not sure you have any clarity about that specific guidance, or again, maybe this was just a process question. I'm not sure if you can answer. And I'm not sure who would answer that.
Which guidance was it, G?
It was the notifying FDA of a discontinuance or interruption in manufacturing of finished product or API under Section 506. So it was the CARES reporting. Again, and this might have been some process question.
Yeah, Giuseppe, we can get back to you on that. I don't think it's final, but we'll get back to you.
Okay, and I'll send you the reference so it's easier for you.
Perfect. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to an online question, please.
Right, our first online question is for Johanna and the drug shortages group. Do we have any timelines to notify the agency about permanent discontinuation? Once we submit the permanent discontinuation, can we recommence the manufacturing activity-based management plan or market demand? And also, should we inform the agency about plan recommence activity?
Yeah, so notification is, it says discontinuation 6 months in advance or as soon as possible. So we really want to know as soon as you know there is going to be either a discontinuation or an issue that would lead to a disruption. And what was the second part of the question?
Sure. Once we submit the permanent discontinuation, can we recommence the manufacturing activity-based management plan or market demand? And also, should we inform the agency about plan recommence activity?
I mean, any information would help us. I would say that you would continue, but any information that would help us as far as, future plans, that would be helpful.
Is that it?
Yep.
Thank you. And let's go back to Mike 1. Your question, please.
Hi, mine is about the policy updates related to guidances and maps. And I know there's a guidance agenda published, but is there a docket similar to requesting PSG updates for guidance updates? In particular, the content and format of an ANDA guidance as it relates to drug device combination products. And that would be also the ANDA filing checklist map. Could there be information related to drug device combination products? Is there a plan to add that information?
So you're both asking for an update on a map and an update on a guidance, and you're asking if there's a docket where you can submit those types of updates. I think there is a docket for submitting requests for guidances, and I can look up that docket number and get it to you. On maps, those are driven by internal agency needs, so we update those as we have the resources and the impetus to do so. I thought we recently published a revision to our ANDA filing map, though.
Yes, but it doesn't have
The information you
this
seek.
particular information there.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take your feedback.
Also, I want to note that typically if, even in the generic drug space, typically if the guidance or the policy is about drug device combination products, it is typically led out of the Office of Combination Products and not out of OPQ or OGD. And so we would obviously be involved in any guidance development of that type. But if it is directly about combination products, typically the Office of Combination Products has heavy involvement in it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mic 2, please.
So this is related to updation in the product-specific guidances. So let's consider a product at a different stages. One is almost ready for the submission, but we are facing a notification which says that the PSG will be updated in the coming months. Then what to do? That's the first question. Second, for the first,
Let's answer one question, please.
so for the same only, it's the second scenario. Okay, you can,
First question, please.
so first question is for the development product, if it is under the, like B study and everything has been completed, but we are getting a notification that PSG will be updated in the coming months. So what be the case? And the same way, the product is like a B study has been partially completed, and it says having a PFC submission, not a directly ANDA submission. Then what? How to proceed? Should I come again, or am I clear?
We're waiting for them to confer. Is that something we can address, or is it too individual?
I think we're not quite sure about the second part of your question, so we might ask you to repeat that. But you're saying for the first question, you have already submitted an ANDA, or you're still in development?
So it's like within a 1 week we are going to submit. It's almost ready to submit.
And by update, you're talking about an update to the forecast list.
Yes.
And what kind of update did the PSG revision indicate?
It says minor.
Minor?
Minor, but it says that there could be a deletion of some studies.
Deletion of studies.
Yeah.
So often PSGs are revised to include either alternative approaches to the existing BE studies that are recommended in that PSG. There are other times when information is being revised to delete a study, in which case you would not be expected to conduct that study. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Online, please, Nora.
So this question is for either Joe or Martha. What is the agency's thinking regarding changes in the PSG for ANDA submissions, which are in the middle of a review cycle, and for products that are already approved? This can affect the ANDA applicant financially and delay the approval.
So we'll answer this in two parts. So the first part, I would direct the applicant to potentially use the PSG TCON pathway. So if that in vivo study was already started and on the forecast list, let's say that the PSG revision was stated that it was going to be revised for that in vivo study, they potentially would be eligible for that PSG TCON meeting. So that would be kind of the first advice. But secondly, I know Martha wants to add on.
Thanks, Joe. As I noted to the earlier question, many of the PSG revisions are intended to provide an alternate approach. Our research and science program is really identifying different ways to establish equivalence that reduce the burden for applicants in being able to demonstrate bioequivalence. So by and large, our PSG revisions are intended to provide an alternate approach that hopefully is less burdensome for the applicant. But any revision that we make to the PSG is intended to reflect our current thinking on the most accurate, reproducible, and sensitive approach to establishing BE. And so in the cases where there are critical revisions, and I don't believe that we've made any to date, those would be expected to be conducted if new studies are required. Those would be expected of both pending and approved applicants.
Thank you. Let's go back to mic 1, please.
This question is for Dr. Joe. Thank you very much for detailed presentation on the PSGs. So I have a question on one particular product where there is no PSG available, but the review packet available at drugs at FDA has very detailed, every detail, like type of studies, number of studies, then the analyte to be tested. Everything is available in the review packet. Can we use that and go ahead with our BE study for the ANDA?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if there is no PSG developed, the high-level answer to that would be yes, you can, but you'd be proceeding at your own risk. So if there was to be a PSG developed, then that could potentially lead to further meetings needed or a filing issue if that PSG was going to be developed.
If it's a complex product, you can also request pre-ANDA meetings that would assist with.
No, it's not a complex product, but the review packet, at the drugs at FDA is very clearly mentions type of studies, the analyte, and the number of studies required. That was approved. That was approved for the RS product. So can we use that, or you want us to go with the TCON or the pre-ANDA meetings?
It's a good question. I would say, based on your explanation, safe and sorry would be probably to go through the pre-ANDA meetings in order to get that clarification before you submit, and if there's a filing issue. Yeah, I would say that would probably be the safest approach here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll do the last question in-house and then one online. So next question in-house, please.
Yes, this is for Captain Saliba. An RLD that is on the shortage list can receive expedited review of an ANDA submission. If it's on the ASHP list, but not on the FDA list, are those lists ever harmonized? Is there communication? Is there any sort of cross-pollination on that?
Yeah, the two lists serve different purposes. So ASHP have their website, and they serve their practitioners and to put in information in detail about each product and each NDC, where our website is directed more at a shortage of a national level, and if the total market is not being met. So it is different. And when we expedite reviews of an application, we, at the time of submission, if the product is listed on our website, then it could likely be expedited, of course, while meeting the ANDA submission and requirements.
But if it's not on your list, but on the ASHP list?
Yeah, we don't consider that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And our last question for this morning comes from online.
Sure. So for Johanna or Ray regarding drug shortages, how will FDA provide support for a new ANDA filer for the product which is under shortage? Does FDA reduce review and the review and approval period? And if yes, how much?
Yeah, it's similar. So the application is considered for expedite if it's on the shortage list. As far as time frame, that is really, it varies, and it's not something that we can give a time frame for.
Okay, thank you all very, very much. Thank you to our panelists and our keynote speakers.